Sorry for no NHL videos the last few days. Things have been crazy busy at home with our newborn baby girl. She's our first child, so I've been locked in with the family. Appreciate all your patience. We're back. At the end, if you like this breakdown, please comment Z, the first letter of my baby girl name. It will help our channel to grow. Let's start. When you look at a slate like this one, and you see the kind of matchups we've got lined up for December 4, 2025, you know it's the type of night where the NHL can flip an entire betting board upside down. And when there are lines this wide, underdogs this hungry, and teams skating into momentum spots that bettors often overlook, that's where we step in here at Beyond the Box Score. Every once in a while, there's a slate that just feels like it's setting up for value. The kind of slate where public money will get trapped chasing favorites while sharp bettors quietly line up the real opportunities. That's exactly what this slate looks like, and that's why we're diving deep into every single matchup on the board tonight. So let's jump into the action and talk about this slate the way it deserves to be discussed, through the lens of performance trends, schedule spots, travel impacts, recent results, and pricing value. Because when you're weighing matchups like these, price matters just as much as the team on the ice. And tonight, there are some numbers that jump off the screen immediately. Let's start with Colorado and New York. The first matchup tonight features the Colorado Avalanche taking on the New York Islanders, and once again the books are making it nearly impossible to touch Colorado on the money line with that price sitting at -190 to -200. You simply cannot bet Colorado at that number, even if you think they're the superior team, and they are the superior team. Colorado, with their Stanley Cup contending core, should absolutely have the edge in this matchup, but pricing matters. When the money line is unplayable, the puck line becomes your path, and in this case the puck line has real value. Laying -1.5 at +130 on Colorado gives you a realistic edge because their style of play can stretch leads late in games. They have too much speed, too much top-end talent, and too much offensive pressure for an Islanders team that has struggled repeatedly to generate consistent scoring. The Avalanche simply get more high-danger opportunities, and when they win, they tend to win by margin. That's why the puck line is the play here. Colorado -1.5 at +130 over the Islanders. Our next matchup takes us to Nashville versus Florida, and the immediate fact that jumps off the page is how heavily the books are favoring Florida, -230 to -240 depending on where you shop. The transcript made it clear that Nashville is a bad team, and that's not exaggeration. This version of Nashville has been inconsistent, poor defensively, and unable to sustain pressure shifts. Meanwhile, Florida is simply the far better team in every phase, and that's why the books are making the money line essentially unplayable. There's no value laying prices over -160 or -170, and Florida sits well beyond that. So once again, the puck line becomes the only play that makes sense. Florida -1.5 at +115 is the move here because their scoring depth, puck possession and forecheck advantage should create enough opportunities to build a multi-goal lead. Nashville's inability to close games is a problem, and Florida can take full advantage of that. The play: Florida -1.5 at +115. Now let's shift to one of the more interesting matchups of the night. Pittsburgh Penguins at Tampa Bay Lightning. Tampa enters as a heavy favorite at -200 to -225, while Pittsburgh sits at +170 to +185 depending on the book. The intriguing part isn't the numbers themselves, it's the schedule and momentum surrounding the two teams. Pittsburgh has been inconsistent, that's true, but they've also been quietly strong on the road with a 7-3-3 away record, which is legitimately good. Tampa has an 8-5 home record, but they're walking into a fatigue spot. They just wrapped up 3 straight road games: Detroit, the Rangers, and the Islanders, and now they return home to face a Pittsburgh team that has been building confidence. Pittsburgh is coming off a 5-1 win over Philadelphia, and before that had been competitive against Toronto. They've also taken their last 2 road games, including 4-3 over Columbus and 5-1 over Philadelphia again. This is the kind of spot where a big dog price aligns with a very real chance for an upset. The transcript called this tremendous value, and it's exactly that. The play here is Pittsburgh Moneyline plus 185, and the reasoning is simple: schedule spot, recent play, and road confidence. Next up, we head to New York versus Ottawa, the Rangers against the Senators, and Ottawa is somehow favored at minus 160. That line does not make sense considering the performance gap between these two teams. The transcript noted that Ottawa shouldn't be favored, and that's absolutely right. New York has been better on the road than at home, and they have the superior goaltender in this matchup. That alone creates value, but the recent results push it even further. The Rangers are coming off a 3-2 overtime win over Dallas, which is a high-quality victory, and they've now won 4 of their last 5. Ottawa, meanwhile, is stepping into a classic letdown spot, their first home game after a 7-game road trip, which historically is one of the toughest scheduling positions in hockey. It's extremely common for teams to come home flat after long travel stretches, especially one that started on the West Coast in Anaheim. The play here is straightforward: New York Moneyline plus 140 over Ottawa. Next we shift over to St. Louis versus Boston, where the books oddly have Boston as the underdog at plus 115. This is another scenario that simply doesn't make sense from a value perspective. St. Louis shouldn't be favored in this matchup, not on their current form and not with their current road performance issues. They're 4-5-3 away from home, while Boston sits at 9-5 at home. Boston has played better hockey in front of their crowd, and they're hungry for a win after the recent stretch: a home victory over Detroit, followed by a narrow road loss to the same Detroit team in a 5-4 result. Meanwhile, St. Louis comes in after a 4-1 home loss to Anaheim, and before that their wins came against Ottawa and Utah, not exactly standout opponents. They've also dropped 4 of their last 5 road games, and that's a glaring red flag. Boston at plus 110 is extremely strong value and one of the cleanest underdog positions on the board. The pick is Boston Moneyline plus 110. The next matchup brings us Detroit versus Columbus, where Columbus is slightly favored at minus 115 to minus 125. The transcript pointed out, and correctly, that this is shaping up to be a strong night for underdogs. Detroit is the better overall team, and their road record of 5-5-1 backs that up. Columbus sits at 5-3-3 at home, which is respectable, but Detroit has historically owned this matchup, taking 7 of their last 10 meetings. Detroit is also coming off a strong 5-4 win over Boston, while Columbus enters off a 5-3 win over New Jersey, but before that they lost 2 straight home games in overtime: 4-3 versus Pittsburgh and 2-1 versus Toronto. This matchup favors Detroit positionally, statistically, and historically, which makes Detroit Moneyline plus 105 the correct play. The next game on the board is Toronto versus Carolina, and in the original transcript this matchup was intentionally skipped with the note that it's a premium pick. Since we are not adding any new information and we must preserve all details exactly as stated, we maintain the same stance, not touching that game due to the original transcript not offering analysis or a pick. Next up, Minnesota versus Calgary, a matchup with tight pricing and conflicting team identities. Minnesota is favored at minus 115 to minus 120, but the transcript made it clear that Minnesota hasn't been convincing this season. Calgary, meanwhile, is at home, and despite being labeled a bad team, they've shown enough competitive fight to deserve consideration at plus 100. Calgary enters this matchup with a 4-4-2 home record, while Minnesota holds a 7-4-1 road record, but Minnesota's lack of offensive pressure is concerning. They've recorded only 24 shots on goal in each of their last 2 games. Yes, they're coming off a 1-0 win over Edmonton, but their inability to generate shots won't translate consistently. Calgary is stepping into a motivational spot, first game back home after a 5-game road trip that began in Vancouver. Teams often come home with renewed energy and urgency in these situations. That's where the value lies. So Calgary Moneyline plus 100 is the play. Then we have Seattle versus Edmonton, with Edmonton heavily favored at minus 220 to minus 240. That price reflects the gap in talent, as Edmonton is clearly the superior team. They've been disappointing overall at the 5th of November 11, but they're 5-3-2 at home and in a prime bounce-back situation. Seattle, meanwhile, is 5-4-3 on the road, but they don't match Edmonton's ceiling or shot creation ability. There's no value on the Edmonton moneyline, but puck line value exists. The transcript emphasized Edmonton's potential to go on a run, and this game fits that narrative. Edmonton on the puck line minus 1.5 at plus 125 is the play. Finally, we close with Chicago versus Los Angeles. The Kings enter as heavy favorites at minus 220 to minus 235, but that price does not reflect how these two teams have actually played. Chicago has been impressive for such a young roster, posting a 5-4-3 road record, while the Kings have struggled significantly at home with a 3-5-3 record. Oddly enough, the Kings play much better on the road with a 9-2-4 record, but that doesn't help them here. Chicago is coming off a 4-3 overtime loss to a strong Vegas team that is a legitimate Stanley Cup contender. This game has the feel of another tight contest, and taking Chicago with margin protection is the correct call. The pick: Chicago puck line plus 1.5 at minus 145. This entire slate has a strong underdog tone, and the numbers reflect that. When prices skew this heavily, finding value is the key, and tonight offers several legitimate value angles across the board. And that wraps up today's full NHL breakdown. If you enjoyed this deep dive analysis, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a breakdown. Here at Beyond the Box Score, we don't chase favorites, we chase value, momentum, and the angles that actually matter. Drop your picks in the comments, let me know which dogs you're riding tonight, and I'll see you in the next breakdown. Until then, stay sharp, stay disciplined, and as always, we'll meet you beyond the box score.